You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means we are back. It is Monday. It is time once again for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Radio Network, your home now for your favorite options podcast for, over 19 years. Wild. Did you miss us last week? We were off last week for the President's Day holiday, but now we are back and rearing to go. And joining me to talk some crypto fun. There's all sorts of fun to be had out there today. Our good buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini from Amberdata. Mr. Greg, what happened? You go away for a few weeks on the show, you come back, and you just broke the whole crypto market, sir. What'd you do?
Yeah, it looks like we're in bear market territory. Quite the interesting market we're seeing here in crypto.
It is some wild stuff. Let's get to it then. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. We're talking about the big dog, which is BTC, looking a wee bit smaller. Remember, we were off now going back 2 weeks till our last show. And our last show, we were north of 70K. Seems like a long time ago. 78.25 to be precise is where we're hanging out on our last show. This week, back below 65,000, 64,474 to be precise, as we kicked off the show. Off over 6,300 handle, 63.51 to be precise. So kind of wild. And Greg, I was just surfing through some Amberdata right before the show. If you're looking at the Skew charts on Amberdata Live right now, it looks like we're just falling out of bed, sir. So I ask you again, what did you do to this market?
Yeah, it's kind of a really interesting time. I think, there's a little bit of weakness in equities right now that's bleeding into crypto. But crypto's got kind of a lot of headwinds going against it. I mean, one of the things that I like to keep in mind is that we had a retail wave early on. Then we had sort of a VC wave of buyers and supporters of crypto. Then we had sort of TradFi investors with the spot ETFs and corporate investors with like MicroStrategy, BMNR, things like that. Who's the incremental buyer now? And unless you get sovereigns buying in, I think everyone's already positioned long. So until positions change hands, for example, Michael Saylor, maybe pukes his positions, it's going to be hard to see who's the next buyer right here. We had a lot of underperformance in Bitcoin versus gold and silver in 2025. And I think this is sort of the tail end of that, and we'll see how this goes. But any weakness in stocks is not going to be good for crypto.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Again, listeners, if you're not messing around over there at pro.amberdata.io, if you're not checking out that GUI, you're missing out on a whole bunch of fun stuff, including, let's start with the vol, because the vol and the Skew, very, very interesting, maybe very different pictures that we're seeing. And coming in right now, if you just looked at the vol, Greg, from our last show 2 weeks ago, you'd think nothing was going on. We were almost literally unched point or two different in every category. The weekly vol was a 57 on our last show, 60 right now. So vol not exactly exploding, at least not yet. Maybe if we racked it right, the second might be a little bit spicier. A 30-day vol, 51.5 on our last show, 52.5. So ticking up a whopping 1 point. And then going out to the 6-month vol was right around 49.75. Was at a 50 when we started the show. So almost literally unched across the board on the vol front. But then we fire up the Skew charts, Greg. It tells a very different story. In fact, looking at the Skew here, it looks like it's been falling out of bed just in the last 24 hours. It seems like breaking through 65,000 really seemed to spook some folks. You look at the weekly Skew, listeners, that one over the last 12 to 24 hours has really fallen out of bed. It was almost -10 on our last show, so the weekly Skew was still signaling pretty dire warnings on our last show. It was -9.6, but double that now, -18.5. I'm sure if I went in and re-racked it right this second, it probably would be even more negative. So if you look at that weekly Skew chart, listeners, it has just fallen out of bed. A monthly Skew, same deal, -8.5 on our show 2 weeks ago, -12.4 now. So taking nearly 4 full points to the dark side, listeners. The 30-day Skew, -5.75, -6.12 this week. So not as much evolution there as you would expect. But Greg, if they're just watching your Skew graphs today, they're thinking the sky is falling out here, sir.
Yeah, the Skew has rarely been this negative. So, or the risk reversal, 25 delta risk reversal specifically. I mean, really the big events in the past, call it 6 years. We had that big sell-off in 2021 in May. Then we had Terra Luna going bankrupt. Then we had FTX. And then we had SVB banking crisis that barely budged a Skew. So, I mean, there's just 3 events, and those were big events that got us this type of negative Skew that we're currently seeing right now. So that's something that's interesting to look at. The other thing I want to look at is just the term structure. So when we look at peak vol events, and we got one in early February, Feb 6, the term structure richness, which is really the ratio of short-dated vol versus longer-dated vol, every time we have a mega event, such as the FTX bankruptcy, COVID, Terra Luna, that peaks out at around 1.3-ish, 1.4. And we barely touched that in Feb 6, and right now we're at 1.1. So the way that I'm reading this is that term structure backwardation isn't bottoming out here. It can extend a little bit more. If we were at that 1.2, 1.3 range, I would think, maybe we start fishing for some dip buying here. But the way that I'm looking at the surface, this can get worse. So even though Skew's pretty extended, overall vol, as you mentioned, can move a lot worse. And if we look at the D-vol index, 56 D-vol isn't that crazy. I mean, right now gold's 38. So, that's not much of a premium over gold in terms of the volatility for Bitcoin. We've seen Bitcoin in 100+ territory many times throughout its history. So I think the extended Skew right now is probably Ibit traders, traditional finance people who have used options to buy protective puts and sell covered calls. Those types of flows can really kind of extend the Skew. But in terms of max pain, looking at the money vol and the term structures is telling us a story that's saying that we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, could have some more to come here, listeners, which again, fascinating stuff. Yet another reason why you should be checking out everything over there in Amberdata land. If you're not, you're missing out on all this cool data, listeners. You mentioned Ibit, Greg. That is obviously the other, now not even the other. It is the 800-pound gorilla in the room right now. Ibit obviously taking it on the chin as well. 36.5 as we kicked off the show, down 3.5 points from where we were 2 weeks ago. That ADV continues to trend upwards to 1 million contracts a day, listeners. 974,000 contracts a day now in Ibit. So clearly a whole heck of a lot of you are trading a whole bunch of Ibit options. It's up another 37,000 over the past 2 weeks. We will pretty much be past that 1 million threshold seemingly in the near future. Already almost hitting it today. 700,000 contracts on the tape right before we started the show, probably more right now. Interestingly enough, going back to the somewhat dichotomy we're seeing between the exacerbating skew and the kind of unched vol, the vol in Ibit right now, since our last show 2 weeks ago, is literally unched as well, hanging out at about a 34. So interesting stuff out there. And if you're wondering, though, the hot option, maybe this is to account for some of that skew we're talking about here. Nearly 33,000 of the 35 puts that expire this Friday, listeners, on the 27th, going up for about 51 cents right now. That is all opening flow. And also we got some March 35 puts. Could potentially be a roll, but that would be strange because it looks like they'd be rolling backwards if that was the case. You don't see a lot of that rolling from the March 35 puts to the Feb. Either way, Feb taking it, 32,000 of the Feb 35 puts and 31,000 of the March 35 puts. So I guess folks are lining up on the 35 strike in Ibit, Greg. Anything catching your eye in the world of Ibit these days?
Yeah, I think that's actually probably a pretty good trade. I mean, obviously it's a short-dated type of lottery trade to buy the 35 puts that expire at the end of the week. But this is the type of environment where those types of trades will actually pay off. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing that's kind of really catching my eye here is just a MicroStrategy situation. Right before earnings, we had sort of a low after hours around $100. That's something that I think market players are paying a lot of attention to. What kind of happens to this big behemoth that owns a lot of Bitcoin that essentially said they're willing to go down with a ship, so to speak. So I think that's kind of something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is just kind of big market cap levels. $1 trillion market cap for Bitcoin is around 50K. The idea that isn't something that people are looking at, I'd find that surprising. I think the market has to test that $1 trillion valuation. That seems to make sense to me just from a kind of a market cap perspective. Then we talk about, we'll get into this later, but some of the smaller cryptos and how altcoins have really underperformed a lot in this past bull cycle, and maybe that's hinting to some of the market action here.
Yeah, it's been a wild time. Since we last chatted with you on the show, we had MSTR earnings. It was a wild time. They have said they are kind of doubling down. I think they've even said again today that they are, even though all of their holdings are now underwater, I think their average price was somewhere around 76, 78,000, that they are continuing to buy more at these lower levels. So you're right. Maybe they are signaling they are willing to go down with the ship, but they were quite optimistic, took quite an optimistic tone. They said their debt doesn't come due until next year. So I guess Bitcoin doesn't have to rebound until next year, Greg, and then they're good. But I do owe you an apology, Greg, because I have joked with you on the past on the show that MSTU, your beloved MSTU, is solely a product for crypto degenerates. But we did get up to some fun in MSTU on our pro chat and in our pro trading. The day of MSTR earnings, we had a lot of our pro members trading a lot of MSTU. I think you could have bought that. You could have bought a 1 day to go strangle in MSTU for somewhere around, I think, 45 cents. And we all know MSTR rallied hard, and there was a good day the next day if you bought any juice in MSTU. But that's wild. 1 day to go, paying half a buck for I think at the time it was trading in that $4 to $5 range. So paying 10% for the value of the straddle with 1 day to go sounds like madness, and yet it ended up, I think, at least a 2x, if not more than that, Greg. So I owe you an apology. Some of our pro members have clearly been lured to the dark side as well in MSTU. But what are your thoughts? You mentioned them kind of going down with the ship. Have you been trading any MSTR or your beloved MSTU of late, sir?
Yeah, I own a couple protective put spreads on MSTR. I still like the short call side of MSTU. I think these like 2x, 3x vehicles are really interesting for kind of longer term decay plays. We have a few in Bitcoin, BitX, Ethereum as well, ETHD, ETHU. So those are like inverse 2x or 2x long. Those are really interesting plays, especially when we have crypto is known for kind of these big, sharp moves. You know, it can move 30% in a day. Well, you take a 2x on that, and that's, down 60%. There's no way that thing recovers. It just can't. The denominator becomes so small that any recovery in the underlying is just going to underperform. So those tracking errors, I think, are super interesting. They're obviously illiquid vehicles, so you kind of got to work those, but there's something there. There's a lot of edge built into it.
Let's see how much edge remains, listeners, as we explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we break down everything going on outside of the big dog, which is BTC. We like to start looking at market cap. And again, if you just went back to our show 2 weeks ago and look now at how much it cost you to break into the top 10, you would think things weren't that dissimilar from where we are now. It cost you about 10.68 to be precise, billion to break into the top 10 2 weeks ago, 10.55 billion this week. So not that big of a change. That said, it was Bitcoin Cash 2 weeks ago that took the number 10 spot. It is Bitcoin Cash again. Number 9, we've got everybody's favorite. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it out there. It's Doge, 15.75 billion. That's down about $500 million from what it was 2 weeks ago. Then we got number 8, Tron, 26.75 billion out there. Number 7, it's Solana, 44.8 billion. Number 6, it's USD Coin, 74.75 billion. Number 5, it's BNB, 81.5 billion. Number 4, it's XRP, 83.2 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 183.6 billion. Number 2, yeah, it's ETH, 224.6, and the big dog BTC, a little bit shy of 1.3 trillion worth of market cap, listeners. But let's get out to ETH because, man, Greg, we talked about Wreckage and some of these other products, and Wreckage and Bitcoin, Wreckage and MSTR, but the Wreckage in ETH is just, I mean, we're almost back to the lows again of last year. Coming into the start of the show, we are at 1857 listeners. So not only have we blown through 2,000, but well below it. We were at 2131 on our last show, down about 274 handles. Obviously, we were well north of 4,000, north of 4,500 not that long ago in ETH, listeners. So kind of a wild time. And again, looking at these skew charts, Greg, it's looking like folks are signaling perhaps the worst is not over for ETH as well. Just an absolute roller coaster. What's catching your eye out here in ETH, sir?
Yeah, I think something interesting about ETH is overall vol. If we look at the devol for ETH, we're looking at 73. That's not expensive. ETH can really move in triple digits vol. So that's something to keep in mind. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, Ethereum's got it has like a lot of kind of changes in philosophy. Vitalik said he wants to move away from sort of this L2 mechanism. And Solana is like a true competitor to ETH. I think there's a scenario out there where the Solana market cap, starts to become competitive with the ETH market cap, but that could happen to the downside. It doesn't have to happen to the upside. ETH is, almost 5 times the market cap of Solana. There's obviously a lot of total value locked on ETH as well, but that's something to keep in mind. I think ETH has a good amount of downside. It wasn't a good sign that Bitcoin was making new all-time highs and ETH couldn't take out its previous all-time high and really got rejected there. So I'm very weary about ETH here. And I think, a real shakeout in overall tech stocks, crypto, ETH could be a solid underperformer to the downside on that type of scenario.
Yeah, you mentioned the vol. Let's get into it. Actually, coming in a little bit since our last show, which is kind of interesting. 78 and a quarter 2 weeks ago, listeners. 75 and 3/4 right now. Even though, as Greg just mentioned, we have seen ETH get into the triple digits pretty easily in the past. So a 75 may sound like a lot compared to some of the other assets we're talking about, but ETH can get higher when the spirit takes it. 30-day vol, 74 and a quarter on our last show. 69 and 3/4, so breaking back through a 70 handle this week. 180-day vol, 71 on our last show, 68. So ETH vol actually coming back to earth a little bit, which is kind of fascinating. What is not coming back to earth is the Skew, listeners. Like we said, looks like it is really getting pretty dire out there today. The Skew 2 weeks ago, negative 7.3. This week, a whopping negative 16 on the weekly Skew. So a kind of wild 30-day Skew, negative 6.7. That's already fairly bearish at a negative 9 right now coming into the start of the show today, listeners. A Holdler Skew, if you want a little bit of a ray of sunshine, it's not that bad. It's negative 3.4 on our last show 2 weeks ago, negative 3 and 3/4. So still looking more bearish, but not quite as pronounced as the monthly or the weekly Skew. I don't know, Greg, I'm kind of with you. Looking at these charts, looking at these Skew numbers, doesn't seem like the worst is over right now for ETH, Mr. Greg, which again, when we're already threatening 1,700 again, ETH folks don't want to hear that, sir. But unfortunately, that might be the case.
This is a type of environment where, 1,700 breaks, we're quickly down to 1,000, and there's not much liquidity in between. I kind of think about it like that could happen. Just for context, so right now, DVOL is 73, 75. But during the bear market of the FTX crisis, default was 153. So that thing can really, really move. So you get like the delta effect and the vol effect all at once. Shorting ETH puts unless you're cash secured and you really want to take the underlying, that could be pretty painful. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like even though the Skew might be priced to the puts relatively expensive compared to recent history, we have a real down move, it just won't matter. Then if you extend that to sort of like these 2x ETFs, like ETHU, for example, well, the 2x ETF, if we get an air pocket from 1,700 down to 1,000, that's like a 35% move times 2. That's a 70% move. All of a sudden, that $20 instrument is worth $6. It can just move pretty quickly and just never recover. So, be weary of those 2x long ETFs in these types of environments. So yeah, there's also the 2x inverse ETHD, which if you're bottom fishing, that could become an interesting instrument down the road to get long ETH is to short that thing or some sort of option structure around it if you can get the liquidity.
Brave folks who are jumping in now to bottom fish. But yeah, maybe we shall see. Speaking of bottom fishing, maybe that's what was going on out here in your beloved Circle, Mr. Greg, because since the last time we talked to you, Circle has been on a wild ride. It continued selling off. I was thinking about you when I saw it trading right around the 50 handle. I was like, we're going to be hitting Greg's 45 strike pretty soon. Broke through 50 ever so briefly. I think it got down to about 49.90 or so. And then it bounced. That was on February 5th. Coming into the show today, it's back up to $60, about $60.20, but obviously still way off those highs it hit not that long ago. Putting up some volume today, about 40,000 contracts. The ADV is nearly 90, though, down about 18,000. The vol coming in, which is kind of interesting. 30-day vol is at an 85, if you're wondering, listeners. Down about 4 points. And we do have some calls lighting it up today, about 8,000 of the 64 calls expiring at the end of the week, going up for about nearly $2, about $1.90. There is some flow there, listeners, so it looks like there could potentially be closing paper, maybe some folks getting the heck out of Dodge. But if that's not enough, Greg, selling off all the way to your strike and then bouncing. We've got earnings coming up this week, so I think a lot of eyes are going to be focused on your beloved Circle. What are your thoughts? First off, did you do any adjustments when we got down to about that 50 handle, or were you still riding it? And what are your thoughts about what's coming up in Circle, sir?
Yeah, I still think Circle is interesting, but it's got to be sort of in a portfolio context. Right now, I'm kind of leaning short crypto, and my long crypto is basically some Circle Delta. But the way I like to think about it is that Circle's got something like a 14 billion market cap. We're looking at ETH at 220, or we're looking at Solana at 44, or Bitcoin above a trillion. I mean, that's a pretty small market cap, relatively speaking. I also think it's not a direct play to crypto in the sense that, we could, let's just say Solana and Ethereum went away, for example. Um, I still think digital cash has a place in the new internet era that we're going into, the 3.0 era. 3.0 era. So to me, there's a little bit of a hedge there that's just not completely a direct play in crypto. But we'll see how that goes. Then we got like the stable coin yield question coming up to the Clarity Act. Are stable coins allowed or not allowed to pay out yield? It sounds like not allowed to pay out yield is kind of winning favor here. And that's good for something like Circle. So that's something else to keep in mind. And the last aspect that I still like is that we're seeing growing market cap in terms of actual USDC in the market. So it's not like that's going down. But anyways, I still think this is more of a longer term play. If crypto really takes a nosedive, I mean, it's going to drag Circle down with it. From my perspective, I'm just going to own the shares, so it'll be fine. And I have some shorts elsewhere to kind of hedge from a portfolio perspective. But that's kind of the reasoning behind my thinking.
Let's run through some of the rest of the altcoin universe. Cover your ears if you don't want to hear a sea of red, listeners. Solana 78.84 when we kicked off the show, down pretty much exactly 10 handles from where it was this time 2 weeks ago. XRP $1.45 on our last show, $1.37. So maybe that one's bottoming out a little bit. Only in air quotes down about 8 cents there. Dogecoin 9.6 cents last week, 9.3 cents. So maybe the bloodletting is stemming. We shall see. Litecoin 54.79 2 weeks ago, 51.49, down $3.30. Cardano 27 cents 2 weeks ago, 26.3 cents. So down a fraction of a penny there. Polkadot $1.33 2 weeks ago, $1.27 this week, down only 6 cents. So maybe you could take some solace, and some of these are not maybe down as much as you might think. And then everyone's favorite Shiba Inu, a million zeros, 6155 2 weeks ago. This week, a million zeros, 6014. Mr. Greg, are there any other altcoin that are catching your eye you want to chat about this week, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when you're looking at altcoins, don't forget about like the supply dynamics. So something like Dogecoin, that has an infinite supply. So those are kind of things you want to keep in mind, especially in a bear market. What are the scarcity dynamics that are built into the code? There are some interesting, prediction market plays versus underlying asset plays. So, for example, the probability on Kalshi of Dogecoin hitting $1 by the end of the next 18 months, something paying like 9% for yes, but the coin itself is just 9 cents. So you could essentially sell the 9% contract and use the proceeds to buy the 9-cent Dogecoin, and then that's perfectly hedged position. So those are kind of interesting trades out there. You can kind of start to scour. But yeah, that's something I would keep in mind. What are the supply dynamics? I know Hype is getting a lot of press lately, especially because there's a lot of trading on Hyperliquid, and that's creating fees, and the business model looks good for Hyperliquid. That being said, though, is if we get a real bear market, crypto trading activity is going to go down a lot. Not only just because volumes are a function of price, but also, a lot of people get burned in crypto. They don't really want to come back. I think that's been part of the overall altcoin narrative as well. With Pump Fund, we've got a bunch of meme coins that were created on Solana. I think a lot of people got burned on those. I don't think those people are coming back. So just something to keep in mind in terms of the supply dynamics.
All right, that's going to do it for a bit of a blood red session on the crypto rundown for this week. Don't blame me, blame Greg. He's the one who's lighting up all of your favorite crypto products. But before we go, Greg, if folks are intrigued, they want to check out some of these Skew graphs and everything else for themselves, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Yeah, you can visit our new website called intelligence.amberdata.com. You can find us on Substack over at amberdataderivative.substack.com. And you can look at our legacy platform at pro.amberdata.io.
There you go, listeners. No shortage of ways for you folks to go kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for us on the Crypto Rundown this week. Back again in about an hour after the closing bell to break down all the action out there in the world of options on the Hot Options Report, the newest edition to the network. Then we're back again with our usual array of content throughout the rest of the week till we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.